After completing VWO at Milton Peters College, she went to the Netherlands to pursue her studies at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. She completed the bachelor's in international business administration and continued with her master's in business administration. She graduated with a double specialization in information management and accounting and control. She is currently the country manager of SOAB St. Martin. Allow me to introduce the first speaker in this session, Ms. Candia Joseph.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is definitely a pleasure to be here today. I was looking forward to being invited for the first time for the Governor's Symposium, and this is quite an invitation, so thank you. So now we're going into the economic perspective, business organizational. We're going to talk a little bit about money. Who is responsible for determining how a nation develops and ensuring that it continues to develop? Is it a government? Is it the private sector? Is it the business community? Is it the people in our society? Who leads this? This debate quickly becomes a chicken and egg debate. The egg produces the chicken produces the egg. Which one is the trigger? Which one comes first? I'm not going to even go into that discussion really deeply, but there is a consensus that there is a partnership between both the public sector and the private sector. They are intertwined with each other and depend on each other. However, opinions differ and debates center around who does what when, and the roles, responsibility, and authority of each party. My task today is to present the private sector's role, specifically the business community in developing a nation and stimulating and securing its future development and improvement. National development is about improving, moving forward, progressive change. From purely economic perspective, development brings about improvement in human welfare, quality in life, and social well-being. It's about satisfying the population's needs and wants. But how do we measure national development? We heard about the education and youth perspectives, so the quality of our schools and what is available to us. We heard about the healthcare, so do we have access to proper healthcare? Are we looking at all aspects of it? And then we look about how developed is our environment and how protected. But there are a range of economic indicators that measure the development of a country. The most popular being, and this is something we hear often, the gross domestic product, the GDP. This is the total value of goods and services produced in a country expressed in currency. Then we go on to the gross national product, also important for St. Martin. This is the total value of goods and services produced in a country, including income from investments from abroad. And thirdly, purchasing power. How much can we buy with our money? This takes into account the local cost of living and is usually expressed per capita, per person. Again, another indicator that is expressed in currency. If there's one thing I think there's a consensus about, is that the private sector is a significant driver of economic development. We can all agree, and I think we've heard it from every speaker, national development requires money, funds, resources. We cannot do it unless we have money. So my premise today is that economic growth is a key contributing driver of national development. Businesses play a key role in creating money, which stimulates economic growth. Through sound business practices and investments, businesses create jobs, create income and profits, which in turn creates tax revenue. Just in that sentence, I mentioned the three things I would like to go further into as to what the businesses can do, the private sector can do to contribute towards national development and securing it, and then stimulating that economic growth that is necessary. First being investments. Business investment is needed in order to keep money circulating. It creates demand for goods and services, which in turn generates employment, which in turn stimulates economic growth. Now, when making investments, it's imperative to ensure that the national resources are also included and considered. In this manner, the chances are great that the money remains and circulates within our island, which affects our GDP positively. And it also further develops the local workforce even more. Now, realistically speaking, we know that what the variety and level of resources we have on the island are, it's very limited sometimes, but it's always worth considering to include the local resources when making investment decisions. Money has to keep in circulation in order to grow our economy. Secondly, sound business practices. By being in control of your organization, having clear strategic objectives that are attuned to your income base and that is translated throughout the organization where everyone knows their role in contributing to your objective. You have control over your expenditures and necessary checks and balances are in place. It creates a climate where business is done less costly and improves productivity. And by running your business this way, the chances are that it will be more efficient, it will grow and create profits. These profits in turn stimulate economic growth, which again stimulates, it's a key driver of national development. And then there's this saying, money attracts money. So you have to invest to be able to get money in. When the economy is thriving, it creates an attractive investment climate that attracts investors, both foreign. It also stimulates entrepreneurship and gets people thinking, gets people involved. And then this way, they also contribute to the economic growth, diversify it, and take it to the next level. So by practicing sound business practices, you have a climate where you create profits and also where money is brought into your industry. And then there's the third one. Now, in the beginning, we heard about the public-private sector relationship, so where money flows from the private sector to the public sector so that they, in turn, can invest in the required infrastructure and social policies that the private sector benefits from. Now, how do we get money flowing from the public sector to the private sector? Another hot topic that's always discussed. Contributing through taxes. Infrastructure and good social policies facilitates the movement of goods and services and people. Figures show that the GDP is rising. However, this is insufficiently reflected in the taxes and fees that are collected. A conclusion is that the private sector is not contributing their fair share of taxes, and this distorts the circular partnership between the public sector and the private sector. We need money to generate and the public sector that has to go into the public sector so that they can do the investments in turn and create the infrastructures, the facilities, and the programs that then the community also benefits from and the business community in turn also benefits from. Our tax system is based on trust and persons understanding their duty to contribute their fair share. Tax revenue is needed for national development. Every citizen has a duty to contribute to the national development agenda. So those are the three things I believe that organizations can focus on to be able to grow the economy and stimulate economic growth. Now, in order for the stimulation of economic growth to be successful and be a successful driver of national development, we need clearly defined objectives as well as agreements and commitments from all parties involved. And this can be achieved through consultation, constant dialogue with and between all stakeholders involved. So the different perspectives that were discussed today, we need to be able to know what each party has to do to achieve the national development. I don't go into exactly what aspects we want to develop in. No matter what choice we make in national development and what we're going to focus on, there needs to be alignment between all parties. So, dialogue within and between. Structured, consistent consultation and dialogue between businesses, between the business and government, and also involving the community when making decisions. And this way we can remain focused on the chosen course. Thus, to summarize, economic growth is a key driver of securing national development. money and resources are needed to develop and secure the development of our nation. The private sector, the business, can contribute through investments, and with those investments include local resources, sound business practices to generate profits and attract investors, and also contributing to the tax revenue so that the private sector, public sector relationship can be maintained. And a key success factor in getting this done is that we have to remain focused, we have to be aligned, and this can be achieved through regular consultation and dialogue between all stakeholders. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph, for your presentation. We move to the next speaker, who will shed some light on the financing of national development. Dr. Peterson is General Manager of the Economic Policy Division at the Central Bank of Aruba. He is in charge of macroeconomic policy development, including economic research, financial stability, international relations, and communication. Previously, he was the Dean and Academic Professor of Sustainable Tourism at the University of Aruba, a position he held for 10 years after working as Associate Professor at the IE Business School in Madrid, Spain. He started his career working as a junior consultant before commencing his academic career as assistant professor at Tilburg University School of Economics, upon receiving his PhD in economics and governance. It is with pleasure that I introduce Dr. Ryan Peterson.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. For me, it's a great pleasure and privilege to be here again. I have had the pleasure of visiting St. Martin over the past 5 years. Whenever I come back, I'm amazed at the progress that St. Martin makes. I am also sure that, and it was confirmed yesterday when I checked in at the front desk here, the lady looked at me and she saw my last name and she says, "You one of them?" I look back at her and, you know, the Samaritan blood coming up in me now, you know, so I say, "Yeah, one of them, you don't know." Yes, my grandfather, I'm lucky enough to have a grandfather that was born and raised in St. Martin, in Simpson Bay, and I'm very proud of that fact also. And much of what I share with you today, actually, strangely enough, and I can't say despite my education, but maybe precisely because my education didn't teach me these things, I'd like to share some thoughts with you on this matter of financing for future and financing basically national development. And I chose this picture specifically also because it captures the essence of St. Martin, the delicacy of St. Martin, and how it's positioned, and of course Simpson Bay is also there, which always holds a specific part in my upbringing and my view of how nations develop and what the future holds basically for St. Martin. So let me share some thoughts with you, and much of what I will share is actually, and much of what I heard this morning is actually not really new. The Caribbean in general and small island states in the region have faced the challenge of development for over 50 years, if not longer. It was the late William Dimas that indicated that GDP per capita and just economic growth would not be enough to sustain that development over the long period. Today we speak of resilience, economic resilience, whether it's the Caribbean Development Bank, the IDB, the IMF, the World Bank, the Commonwealth, ECLAC, UNDP. They're all looking to build that resilience of small island states. The question still remains, ladies and gentlemen, how do we build that resilience? Not reinventing the wheel again, not looking back to past policies, but looking forward. It is quite interesting, actually, that this morning, the late Winston Churchill, yes, I'm talking about Brexit. You know what Winston Churchill once said? He said a lot, by the way. But if we open up a quarrel between the past and the present, we shall lose the future. We shall lose the opportunities that are in front of us. And I commend the organizers today to start this conference with the youth. For without the youth, there is no future. For without their voices, there is no future. For without the values of the youth, there is no future. Too often, and this is from an economist, we start with the economy and we're like, oh yeah, let's figure out the youth, the next generation. 1/3 of your population is under the age of 24. The ingenuity and the talents that they have, that if we nurture that, if we nourish that, to unleash that power to the benefit of St. Martin, that is resilience. That is rising to the occasion, as Your Excellency, the Prime Minister said. That is overcoming challenges, and St. Martin hasn't done that before. We do not have to follow the path of my grandfather in the 1920s when he left the island looking abroad for opportunities. St. Martin has what it takes. And if you come together, work together, stick together, that is when you will find the answer. But that precisely, ladies and gentlemen, is the challenge that faces us all. Yes, funding is necessary, financing is necessary. But here's the question to you, St. Martin. What is your northern star? What drives you as a nation? What are your objectives? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? I am not here to tell you what those are. I think the governor gave us an indication. He spoke about dignity. He spoke about quality. He spoke about excellence. If excellence is really your goal, if dignity and integrity are really your objectives, if that is what you value, then I dare say that only 27% of your youth indicate that education is okay. That, for St. Martin, should be unacceptable. You should take it all the way further and really invest in excellence, in healthcare, in education, in the environment, ecology, financing. All those topics were discussed here today. It's bringing all those topics together. There's an old story of Alice in Wonderland, and the Mad Hatter asks her, where do you want to go? And she says, anywhere. And then he says, well, if it's anywhere you want to go, any means will get you there. So as long as you don't have your northern star, as long as you don't have that direction, and it really doesn't matter because it's your story, it is your history, and it's your future. You have to determine that path, where you will take it, collectively, in dialogue, private sector, public sector. We heard the previous speaker speak about that, indicating how important that is. It is only then that you will achieve that. No matter amount of money of and by itself will solve that problem. Because if I would put $100 million right now inside this room, and I would give you maybe 30 minutes to figure out what to do with it, guess what would happen? Except maybe for one person taking it and running out the door. Smart guy. And that's what I mean. Would you be able to form a consensus in 30 minutes where to put that 100 million? And it's a matter of that consensus and sticking with that collaborative platform that needs to be developed with the voice of the youth, with the voice of the environment. And if the environment and ecology doesn't have a voice, then we have speakers inside this room that do speak on behalf of the fish and the sharks and the monkeys. I haven't given up hope. I'm still struggling with the marine park. So thanks for the inspiration, though. I know my dreams will come true one day, so thank you for that, Tadzio. So these are things that are extremely important. And when we look at this financing for the future, our vision needs to be directed towards the future. And I call this ecosystemic finance. This is inspired by Tadzio. He spoke about biodiversity and the richness of biodiversity. Well, in a similar fashion, when you look at finance for the future, there are 3 essential elements that need to be included inside here. And to some extent, they summarize much of what I heard this morning already, so you know this. We speak about institutions and strengthening institutions. We speak about fiscal sustainability. I'll take it a step further. We need fiscal governance before we can get to fiscal sustainability. We speak about public-private partnerships. Yes, these are important. There are other means, there are new means actually we see. We speak about the fair share of the private sector. Well, sometimes we can make it cheaper, but we can make it easier. There are other means of collecting taxes that have not been explored as yet on St. Martin and throughout the region. So the strength of institutions, without strong institutions, we shall not be able to create that future that we need in St. Martin to achieve those sustainable development goals that we have. Whether it's goal 1, goal 7, or goal 8, or goal 17, these are things that are essential to develop the prosperity and the quality of life that we all seek for St. Martin. The second core element that we need is investments. We need to have the private sector involved in development. Over the past 50 years, we've seen the pendulum swing. It's the government taking the lead, and then the private sector taking the lead, and then the government taking the lead. Well, that pendulum swing from public to private has proven quite unproductive, has proven quite unsustainable so. So the only way forward is moving together in tandem. Well, that means that the private sector needs to have an environment, just like an ecosystem, just like the air that we breathe and the ideas that inspire us. They need to have that environment. Capital needs to be able to flow freely in a market, because if not, you're going to stifle the market. You're going to make it tough for businesses. And yes, the Caribbean is a tough neighborhood. I know that. And sometimes toughness makes us stronger. But there are some small and medium-sized enterprises covering well over 90% of our economy that sometimes need an extra stimulus, that need a lending hand. And that's important, to create an environment that is competitive, but that it's fair, that it's free, and it's also directed towards the future. Not only regurgitating the successes of the past, but preparing our economy for the successes of the future. And these things are extremely important. Looking at the environment, looking at innovation, resiliency funds are extremely important and will become extremely more important for St. Martin and the other islands in the Caribbean. Not just as an educational fund, not just as an innovation fund or an ecological fund, but an integrated resiliency fund. How do we mobilize our local resources to prepare for that future? And I say that beyond just creating fiscal buffers, just beyond savings. We can create the buffers and we can improve financial stability and macroeconomic stability. But anyone knows that a system that is faced with an increasingly dynamic and turbulent environment, inertia creeps in when that system becomes too stable. So there needs to be a certain amount of new oxygen, new currents, new species, new ideas need to be instilled in that system in order to realize to what I think is the most important pillar for the future of development, which is innovation. We all remember those famous words of Albert Einstein. Remember how he defined insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result? Well, if we keep doing what we've been doing in the Caribbean for the past 50 years, we shouldn't be amazed when we wake up one day and say, well, what happened? We know more today about sustainability than we did 50 years ago, to some extent. And that's where my grandfather comes into play. See, when my grandfather was fishing in that small blue boat there, he understood that if the crab was too small or the fish was too small, he would put it back in the ocean because he knew it would have a chance to live, to add to that ecosystem diversity. That is part of the bigger system. The circularity of that system is increasingly important. And without innovation, without micro-enterprising, without incubation centers, and I certainly believe that our educational system is failing our youth. It is not our youth that is failing our educational system. If we teach our system like you are sitting here today, can you blame the youth for not being engaged? Just sitting there statically, once in a while, going away at your phone? We need to learn to engage the youth, unleash their potential. Incubation centers are extremely important to unleash that potential. Public sector, private sector, citizenship, community development, all of these can come together and should come together in order to guarantee the future of development. And that probably will be the only way to create value for St. Martin. To end my presentation, let me paraphrase a quote that was actually inspired by Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln basically said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. Well, the best way to finance the future is to fashion it. And the key word here is not finance. The key word here is fashion. And I was asked yesterday, but what do you mean by fashion? What is fashion? You see, ladies and gentlemen, fashioning means a couple of things. Yes, it means to construct, to build, to model. But it also means to tailor. It also means to customize. It also means to create. And if I can be so bold and free, I would add a sixth C to that list. It requires creativity to face old problems and to ask new questions and not just to look at old answers. If we are able to fashion our future, we should be proactive. We should be forward-looking, not backward-looking. We should look to what is to be expected and what we need as an ability and capabilities and competencies in our nation to build that integrity, to build that dignity, to qualities and the essences that you want for St. Martin. Only then, when we unleash the power that St. Martin has in its people, in business, in government, in NGOs, only then will you be able to fashion that future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.